Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad that, well, it's not morning. It's morning here in New Mexico. It is, we're around the world in different time zones. So whatever time zone you're in, I'm glad you're here. What we're going to do today is do an introduction to Sephardic resources. And there are so many. Every day there is more out there. And in fact, this morning I just added some new slides of a new document that I just was made aware of at the in Amsterdam at the archives there. So it's going to be a little bit far-ranging, a little bit of history, a little bit of DNA, a little bit of this, but all of these things will build on future webinars. So it's a good introduction to what's out there. Now, the first thing, of course, is who are we? We can identify these days as whether, we're Sephardic, we're Ashkenazi, we're Mizrahi. In the narrowest terms, of course, Sephardic refers to the Jewish communities of Iberia, Spain, and Portugal. They were expelled in 1492 from Spain, 1536 and later in Portugal, and they went everywhere. We went everywhere. The Mediterranean, North Africa, Italy, Sicily, Greece, Rhodes, Turkey, the Balkans, the Caribbean, and the New World. Ashkenazim, of course, Central and Eastern Europe. Originally, they went up the Rhone Valley and they went into Western and Eastern Europe. And when we talk about the Mizrahi Jews, we're talking about the Eastern Jews, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, India. This dates back to the Assyrian and the Babylonian exiles. So there are three main categories. There are other categories, of course, but these are the three main ones. And today we'll be dealing basically with the Sephardic communities. What is interesting about Sephardic genealogy is that in many places, all three of these groups live together. So it gets very interesting. How did all these people wind up around the world? It's rather simple. Original migration from the land of Israel. They came with the Roman legions as merchants and slaves. And this, of course, is after the destruction of the temple in 70 CE and earlier. And in fact, there are records, well, not records, there's historical evidence that they came with the Phoenicians in the 10th century BCE. Now, what's really fascinating are the numbers, because when you look at the numbers, we begin to wonder why at this point there isn't more emphasis and focus on the Sephardic Jews, because when we look at the numbers in the 12th century, the Sephardim were 90% of world Jewry. By the 1700s, they were half of world Jewry. The Ashkenazim in 1700s, I know it says 10%, it should be 50%. By 1990, of course, 60% of Israel is Ashkenazi, but it's becoming Sephardic. The numbers change all the times. The best thing about the Roman Empire is that their censuses were amazing, and we know from their records that 25% of the Roman Empire was Jewish in the Eastern Mediterranean, 10% of the entire Roman Empire was Jewish, and in the Roman census of 48 CE, there were 7 million Jews. What is the main difference between Ashkenazi and Sephardic? And there are some pretty good differences. We know that the word Ashkenaz in German means German in Hebrew. Sephard is Spain in Hebrew. Generally, the Ashkenazim lived in Eastern and Western Europe, and of course in the US and South America and all over the place. While the Sephardim originally, of course, came from Iberia, went to North Africa, and moved everywhere else. The Ashkenazim use Yiddish at home, and well, not anymore. Let's call it historically. Yiddish was used in the home and on the street. For the Sephardim, it was Ladino or Judesmo or Judeo-Espanol. It has a lot of names. It even is called Haketia in North Africa. Hebrew, of course, for both groups was the language of religion and study. And both of them have different liturgies. The prayers are different. Different timing. The music, of course, is different, and the food, thank God, is really different in really good. So let's get back to the definitions now. There are some scholars that go with the broad definition. Anybody who's non-Ashkenazi, non-Yiddish speaking, non-Eastern European, has no knowledge of customs or traditions of other Jewish cultures. Anybody that's non-Ashkenazi can be considered Sephardi. There is a group of people who go with the narrow definition, and that is only those whose roots can be traced to Iberia, Spain, or Portugal, including those after 1492 or earlier. Some left in 1391 or even earlier. So you could really only call yourself Sephardic if you were directly from Spain or Portugal, even though your families and ancestors settled in Turkey, Iraq, Syria, North Africa, Italy, wherever. And in Hebrew, the term for pure Sephardi is Sephardi Tahor. Some of the people who really believe in this narrow definition will, after their signatures, add S for Sam, T for Tom, which are the Hebrew letters for S and for T, Sephardi Tahor, which means pure Sephardi. When we're talking about the Mizrahi Jews, where these are the Eastern Jews dispersed by the Assyrian and Babylonian exiles, they went to the Middle East and Asia and everywhere else around the world. To make it more confusing, Sephardim and Mizrahim lived side by side in many different places. A group we hadn't mentioned yet are the Jews of Rome, called Italki, and they are considered the oldest Jewish community in Europe since the year 2000. 2,000 years living in Europe. They have their own dialect, their own liturgy, their own customs, and they're generally not happy about being included in the broad term of Sephardim. The Romaniot are another group. These are the indigenous Greek-speaking Jews of the Mediterranean, and after 1492, they were mostly absorbed or subsumed by the Iberian Sephardim. There are some pockets that remain, such as the Yonanina group, and there is actually a synagogue on the Lower East Side in New York City of the Jews that come from Yonanina. Languages are really important when we're talking about Sephardic and Jewish genealogy in general. If you're Ashkenazi, it's kind of easy. If you have Yiddish and you have Hebrew and the secular languages of Europe, you can get along with it. If you are from a Sephardic community, they use Ladino, Judeo-Espanol, Judesmo. They have local dialects, all in addition to the secular languages. And in some places, even in Iberia, you can see the records are in Latin or in Catalan. For Mizrahim, we have Judeo-Farsi, Judeo-Arabic, Judeo-Tat, Aramaic, and even city dialects. In Iran, there were several cities that had their own completely separate dialects that were unintelligible to people from other cities. The Romaniots, of course, had Greek, and the Roman Italkis have their own dialects. So why do we call Mizrahim and Romaniot and Italki Sephardim? Because most people will think of Ashkenazim and they'll think of Sephardim. The liturgy is similar. The food traditions are similar. Many of the groups eat rice on Passover, for example. Not all, but many do. And the life cycle traditions are similar. I would almost sum it up. It's Tuesday, let's have a party. It's a totally different kind of lifestyle, let's put it that way. So the customs, liturgy, and food are more similar to each other than to Ashkenazim, so they're included in the broad definition. Now, one of the most fascinating things, a study was done by my personal friend and personal researcher, Maria Jose Surribas in Barcelona. She's done amazing work in the archives of Cervera, which was a vibrant, large crossroads community in Catalonia in the medieval ages. She's gone through 10,000 documents and probably more. She did write an article on the naming conventions used in Cervera, which marvelous article. And these are the next few slides are the names that she's extracted from many of these records. So I'm sure if you look at this slide, and you'll recognize some of the names, some of them will be extremely different from what you've been thinking of as names in general, or definitely Sephardic names, or definitely Jewish names. The women are identified generally as daughter of, wife of, widow of. Rarely do they have surnames. During the times of 1391 and 1492, of course, Jews that were forcibly converted adopted new names. There are some lists of names that are very useful. There's a list from Barcelona that has some 300 names listing the old names and the new names. These are just a few. And you can see the new names on the left and the old names on the right. Some people actually just kept the same name. Other people changed them. And we know that the new names, we know from archival records, which are amazing in Spain and go back to the year 1000, that very often people in those records, even 100 years after 1492, are still referred to the family when they were Jews, when he was a Jew, a former Jew, because they were dealing with legal matters, real estate matters, inheritance matters, and they had to make sure they were talking about the correct person in the archive. These are the surnames from Cervera, and the numbers after the names are how many mentions of the family. So you can see surnames that today we recognize some of them we don't. Depends on where the descendants of these families went. But it's a very useful thing on seeing the names that were used in the Middle Ages. Medieval times. What was very interesting was that with the work that Maria Jose did, she was able to put together 4 and 5 generations of a family, kind of truncated family trees. And I actually, through using my heritage, we were able to find descendants of some of those families. So when you have even a truncated tree from then, which is 4 generations, some cases we had 5 generations mentioned in certain specific documents, we were able to connect them to people in contemporary times, which was really fascinating. Occupations listed ran the gamut from everywhere, from a broker to a tailor, someone who prepared wool to be woven, and we can see that the occupations were referred to either in Latin or in Catalan. Many of the records in the archives, the early archives, are in Latin, which is another language now you have to add when you're doing Sephardic research. Of course, we're talking about this. A lot of this depends on Inquisition records. There were various forced conversions. Major conversions resulted, of course, in exile and immigration. Inquisition spread to the New World. Beginning in 1391, there were riots and massacres across Spain. We had the Spanish expulsion in 1492, the Sicilian expulsion a year later. You had the first Portuguese expulsion in 1497, and then again in 1537. So the Inquisition goes all the way down, literally, for centuries. In 1821, Mexico City burned a woman at the stake. That was the last task, I guess, of the Inquisition in the New World. So we have many people who are descendants of conversos in many countries around the world, especially here in the America in the Southwest, where I am. Just to go over this again, where did the Sephardim go? From Spain, they left in 1391 and 1492. Sicily, Portugal, Italy, Western and Eastern Europe. In the New World, they went to Dutch Brazil. They left when the Portuguese took over again. They went to the Caribbean. They went to Guyana. The this was a very educated class of people. They had huge worldwide family networks, very close. They were fluent in numerous languages. They were educated. They ran the plantations, the sugar mills, the shipping, and the trade. In the New World, we know that by 1630, conversos, descendants of the conversos, were settled in every town in the Spanish Empire in the New World. By 1569, they were in New Spain. Capital is Mexico City. Also in 1569, they were in New Castile, which is Peru, the capital of Lima. In 1610, New Granada from Cartagena. 1776, which is a great year for American history, they were in Rio de la Plata, Buenos Aires, and it also covered, as well as Argentina, covered Uruguay and Paraguay. So everybody went all over. This is a rather truncated map, basically where the Ashkenazim were, basically where the Middle Eastern Mizrahim were, and basically where the Sephardic went. But again, the same detail is that in many places, these people lived together in communities side by side. What many people don't know is that when we talk about Turkey, which had a huge community of Sephardic Jews, they actually had an Ashkenazi community from Poland in the 14th century in Constantinople, because Jews were thrown out of Poland. Many of them actually wound up in Turkey. So for a long time in Turkey, there was a distinct Ashkenazi community and a Sephardic community. Contemporary times, everybody's intermarried. But when you talk about 14th century Poland, you have to understand that there were a lot of Polish Jews in Turkey in Constantinople back in the 14th century. So these are just, again, we're going over this again because we have to see that people went everywhere and went to so many different places. When we talk about Italy, Pisa, Livorno, in the 18th and 19th century, 14% of the population was Jewish, and they were Spanish and Portuguese speaking. That's in the 18th and 19th centuries. People went to Tunisia and Morocco. In 1780, Marseille, people went there from Livorno, which is, in English we call it Leghorn. This is a wonderful book by the Oxford University Press, and I have to apologize for the blurriness of this, but this is like the beginning of the Sephardim in Amsterdam and in The Hague, and it's the first 20 years of the 18th century. These are some of the families that are already listed in the records. So we have Osorio, we have Levi Jimenez, Pereira, Salvador, Lopez, I think it's Lopez de Luz actually, Machado, De Souza, Mesquita, Azevedo, Abendana. Some of these books are amazing. You just read it and you keep looking at these books. And like I like to tell people, these lists look like the, here in New Mexico, look like the Albuquerque and the Santa Fe telephone books, if we still had phone books. Etz Chaim in Amsterdam is the oldest still functioning Jewish library in the world. And this actually is one of the plaques at Etz Chaim. This is, I guess, what we would call today the Sisterhood of the Congregation. It's hard to see some of these names because the photo was taken at not a fantastic angle, but just reading through the names, and everyone I've shown this to when I present this at conferences, they all go, oh my goodness, my name is there, my aunt's name is there, et cetera, et cetera. And these are the names that are still here. Going back to the Spanish archives, we know that in the earliest days, the Spanish archives go back to about the year 1000. People were already using surnames way back then. It's hard, and I'm not going to say you can't directly connect someone today with the surname that was used back in the archives in 1000, but the names were used in the archival documents very, very, very early. And when you compare that to most of Europe, where Jews really were not required to have surnames until the 1820s or so, it's a huge difference. I personally have a record from 1327 in Girona, and the other records are from 1358 through 1398 in Lleida, also known as Lerida in Catalonia. So if you're researching your Sephardic records, it's really great because you can go back way further than most Ashkenazim can, for sure. And this actually is on the Sephardic diaspora, which is a wonderful Facebook group. Tan Thielen is an archivist, and the things that are posted at the Sephardic diaspora are wonderful. I would advise people who think they have a connection to Amsterdam, and even if they don't know, to find out. Tan is amazingly generous with his time and his knowledge. Great, great guy. So we have some manuscripts that I'll show after this. So we know that in 1674, Abraham de Israel Zarache was the synagogue, and that's what they call Eschaim. It's from the word synagogue, synagogue, the assistant treasurer. And we know that the list that I will show you was published in 1875 for the congregation's 200th anniversary. So we have these links. Now this is easier to see. You can see these names. And again, I'm telling you, this looks like the Albuquerque phone book and the Santa Fe phone book and many other communities in the Sephardic world. And this is literally from 1675. And it was on the Sephardic diaspora this morning. People were already saying they're finding their families there. This is a close-up, which is a little easier. And amazing, amazing names from literally from what, 3 centuries ago already. We know that, and the handwriting is usually quite good. They're very, very interesting, clearly written records. In 5433, if you look at the bottom left signature, you will see that he signed it. And this is showing that he was appointed as the assistant treasurer of the Talmud Torah. And it's a wonderful, wonderful document. So people went because of the Inquisition. They went to the New World. Going back to the Inquisition, we know that 1528 was the first auto de fe in Mexico. 1821 was the last one. Auto de fe is generally meant a burning in the plaza of Mexico City, and which is exactly what they did. They burned people to death alive. This is an example of a Mexico City Inquisition file. The files are there in Mexico City. They are extensive and they're very clear. So this is a translation of one for this Pedro Núñez de Montalban. He lived in Tlaxcala. He was processed in 1576, which means he was caught up in the Inquisition. At the very top line is the file number, so that can always be researched again. It was documented that he was a descendant of Jews. And another file, AGN 81, number 17, it shows he's from Medina. It shows all these other things. We see Francisco Núñez Navarro, known as Francisco Núñez. He's 43 years old. He was born in Villa Chazin in Portugal. He was the son of Francisco, who was born and died in that town. His mother was Catalina Enriquez. She was born in La Torre de Moncorvo. They were both listed as Hebrew New Christians. He was circumcised. He was a bachelor. He was a peddler. He resided in Guadalajara. Testimony means the witnesses who testified against him are listed by name: Rafael Enriquez, Violante Juarez, Isabella Antunes, and usually the exact testimony of all these witnesses is also in the Inquisition file. His crime was that he was an observer of Mosaic laws. He confessed. He was reconciled. Reconciled doesn't mean they slapped you on the hand. It means basically you were burned. He had San Benito, which people wore, I guess, while they were still alive. That was later hung in the churches so the families would see it for the rest of the time. His property was confiscated, and I love what it says here. He's sentenced to life imprisonment. I guess when you're burned, after you're burned, but you're still considered to be in imprisonment for life. And there are cases, of course, in the Inquisition where people who died remains were literally dug up and burned again. It was not a great time. Talking about the New World, we can go to the island of Jamaica, where we can see out of 401 plantations, 115 were Jewish. The ones on the left, that's the name of the plantation. Many of them are in Hebrew. And on the right, you can see who owned that plantation. So we have the names. We have Baez, we have Metza, Arias, Granada, Enriquez de Granada, Sanchez. The lists are available in many books. Arbel's book on the Jews of the Caribbean is really, really good for this case, for research on all the Caribbean islands. There are so many resources online. The websites, there are more websites every day. There are more archives that are doing digital recording. There are more societies being established. There are blogs. There are very, very active Facebook groups. Every day there are more resources. Hold on one second because I just have to turn something down here. I'll be right back in 20 seconds. I'm sorry about that. Okay. The very first Sephardic website, I think it was established, was Sephardic.com. It was established by Harry Stein, who unfortunately we lost a few years ago. He was Ashkenazi, but his wife was an Abravanel, and he established this website in honor of her family. Has a name search engine, indexed something like 65 books, which is now archived at sephardicgen.com. It had a far-ranging discussion group. It had sections on customs and traditions. It even had a section on Jewish heraldry, which was family crests, coats of arms, that some of the Iberian families had. It's now defunct, of course, because we lost Harry, but the name search engine is at sephardicgen.com. We'll talk about that later. The publications that were in the index included specialized community books from literally around the world, from Italy, from Brazil, Portugal, Jamaica, Hamburg, the Balkans, New Spain, very interesting records. It didn't have a lot of information on the index. It specifically was an index. If you needed more information, you had to actually get a hold of that publication. The records included Bevis Marks, the Spanish-Portuguese synagogue in London, Amsterdam civil records, lists of Sephardic brides and grooms, circumcision registers, all kinds of medieval documents, Spanish archive publications, Inquisition lists, and many, many, many more. Following the names, this is an example of what a list would be. And the number after the name was the publication that the name was found in. So basically, this is all you saw. And if you needed more information, you would have to get a hold of the publication. But it was a start, because there really wasn't anything that accessible at the time when Harry organized the name search engine at sephardim.com. Now, as I said, that particular database is now at sephardicgen.com. It was founded by Dr. Jeff Malka, who is a retired orthopedic surgeon. He lives in the DC area. It's composed of diverse databases. New ones are added all the time. Updates are made. The databases are searchable in English, French, and Spanish. There are country resources, there's articles, there's books, there's no discussion group. The the first thing that I always go to is on the left picture, you'll see we have Sephardic history, Sephardic genealogy, websites by country, and databases. You want to go to the tab, to the database tab, and you will see this. So the main one is the Consolidated Index of Sephardic Surnames. That's the index to all of the databases on the website. So on the bottom part of the screen, we can see some of the databases that are in there. There are many, many, many databases. You can search it by gazetteer. You can do it by country. But the consolidated index is the best thing because then you can put in a name. There are 5 or 6 ways of searching by exact, contains, sounds like, phonetic. I always suggest that you, because of the spellings, variance in spellings, that you search each name using each of those permutations. In America, we would spell if someone's name began with an H. In many countries, they just left off the H and used the A. So you have to try contains, you have to do phonetic, you have to do exact, because you really don't know how the name showed up in a particular database. Now, for European Sephardic names, these are surnames of Spanish, Portuguese, New Christians who returned to Judaism sometime after 2 centuries in Amsterdam and other places. There are often compound names, 2 names per Iberian custom, one name the paternal line, one name is the maternal line. There are something like 1,150 surnames for Amsterdam, which was the largest community. As far as people goes. For London, there are some 1,200 surnames, and Hamburg, which had a Sephardic community, 322. Later on in time, of course, there was a very large Sephardic community in Vienna of Turkish Jews. Those records, I believe, are accessible through Jewish Gen. Now, a name is a clue. You can't really say that this is a name from the year 1200 and we have the same name. Is it the same family? Not really. You don't know. You can't make that jump automatically. So the first myth that I always try to dispel is that many people think that if a name ends in ES or EZ, that shows in one case that it's Jewish, in one case that it's not. But this is not. It's only the difference between spellings in Spanish and Portuguese. And you have to understand that Jews and Catholics use the same surnames. People change their old names to new names to fit in. And you really don't know. To find the Jewish link, it requires research, going back generation by generation. You still have to record your oral history, because even if you can't find a resource now, there might be another resource tomorrow or next week or next month that might confirm that oral history. Using in the Spanish archives, of course, and also the Portuguese. We have archival records. We have notarial records. Inquisition records, of course, are the most common indications of whether a name was Jewish or not, because as I said before, Jews were identified as such even long after 1492. So the archival records, which thanks to Maria Jose, I got a really good introduction from myself, and I visited there. This is an example of a record from 1499, and this, of course, is the translation. On the bottom is the reference number from the Severa archives. And so we have Mestre Joan de Pau. Mestre generally means he was a doctor, also called de Quercy. Christian, who, when he was a Jew, was called Isaac Jacob de Quercy, acknowledged he had been repaid an amount owed to him. So this was how they described it. This was only 7 years after the expulsion. But the original document was written on August 23rd, 1484, before the expulsion. So this is why they had to definitely describe the person as who he was or what he was at the time of the original document. So when you're dealing with real estate, inheritance, money matters, you have to be sure you have the right person. This is July 10th, 1492. Not a great time to sell real estate. So we know that Yusef Cavalier, who was a Jew living in Cervera, he was an agent for his brother, who was also a Jew, a doctor. The wife's name is listed, Bonafia. And because of the expulsion edict, he sells a house to a non-Jewish merchant in Cervera. The house that had belonged to another Jewish resident, Lobel Samarel, as per the terms made before the notary in 1491. The witnesses are Montaner, who's a Christian, and Vidal Andali, who is Jewish. They both lived in Cervera. So we have that document from 1492. This is a document going back to 1350. So we see that Ramon Ferrer, who lived in Tarrega, said that he owes 40 sous. I have no idea what that is in today's terms, to Astragona, who is the wife of Abram Avismel, a Jew. We believe that she was a midwife. That's what we're thinking. That's what Maria Jose says. The reason of the debt was Astragona's salary, because she provided medical care to Ramon's wife. And the original document, as you see, is not in Catalan. It is in Latin. So you really need to have Latin as well. When we go to the Amsterdam records, which are phenomenal, if you have a Amsterdam connection, you have found the proverbial gold mine. The records are phenomenal. They go back to the 1600s, and they're very, very well preserved in the Etz Chaim library there, and also records are in the state archives. So one of the ones that I really like is the Vastia's alias list. People went back and forth. People went from Spain to Amsterdam. They reclaimed their names. They returned to Judaism. They did stay in some stayed in Amsterdam. Some went all over Europe. Some went to the New World. People went everywhere. But many of them, because of their livelihoods, they were merchants. One never knows where they wound up. We know of people that had moved to Amsterdam and then went back to Spain for business purposes. Spain and Portugal, traveled all around the world. So we know that this father, Isaac, and his son Jacob used over 14 different names. And it was just another way of hiding. If someone came after you and said, "You're this guy," and, "Oh, no, I'm not this guy, I'm this guy, that's my other name." So we have people with Spanish names, with Portuguese names. Even at the bottom, you will see Antonio da Costa adopted a Dutch name. So it takes a lot of digging. It's really fascinating. But just to see how many names all these people adopted at different times for different purposes, I think this is just fascinating. Going back to the index of names, which is on Sephardic Gen, if you use a consolidated surname index. This is just one example. Gallegos, everybody in the Southwest and in New World is Gallegos, but it's also listed as a Balkan surname in the Balkan Jewish surname database, and specifically from Greece. Everybody in New Mexico is a Chavez. And there are many compound names. So this is the index from SephardicGen.com. So there are various spellings of Chavez depending on what the original language is. You can see variations here. These are the given names. These are found in various databases, from Turkish deportees, the Amsterdam personal files, Turkish Sephardic marriage records, Turkish Jews killed in the Holocaust, Caribbean Sephardic surnames, Sephardic marriage certificates from Italy. And the countries are far-ranging: Netherlands, Turkey, Egypt, Northern Europe, Caribbean, Italy, and Morocco. So this is a name that has been used throughout the Sephardic worldwide. community. Silva is another name. It can also be a compound name. So this name in various formats also is in the Amsterdam Poor Jews, Amsterdam Personal Files, Portuguese Inquisition, cemeteries, and in countries ranging from the Netherlands to Bulgaria to France to Portugal, Greece, and Italy. Mendez is another one of these very, very common names. They're listed all over the records in Amsterdam and everywhere else. They can also be compounded names. And again, they're in Portuguese Inquisition trials, rabbinical families, Sephardic marriages in Egypt, in Tunisia, in Algeria, in the census in Palestine at that time, Montefiore, 1839, 1840 is listed. It's really fascinating all over the place. You've got these records from everywhere. Griego is another one. Of course, in Spanish, Griego means Greek. There was a Griego who came with Oñate when they settled in New Mexico in 1598, and he was actually born in Candiote. So again, this is another one. Loya. We have the Martinez also, same thing. If you see on the bottom, the root name is Martin from Martinez, and it's in the Bevis Mark Synagogue in London. Duran is a rabbinical family all over the place. Garcia, and it could also be spelled Gracia. People were hiding, they just changed the spellings of their names. There's a Curiel, which is listed all over, and lots of compound names as well. Per Bonin is a journalist and a genealogist in Spain. He lives outside of Barcelona. And in his book, which is Sangre Judía, the 4th edition, if you go to the 3rd one over here, you will see that it's our root name, if Talalai was Talaya, but in medieval times, in medieval handwriting, the T looked like a C. So when Pere was putting the book together, he actually listed it under C instead of T, and he promised me when he does another edition, he'll put it in the correct spelling. But it's a very useful book. It's a start. It's a clue. He went through his documents from everywhere. He listed the year of the document and the town that document was found in the archive. So it's a very, very good clue for a lot of people to start. Doesn't mean it's the same family, but it's a place to start to investigate. Yad Vashem is very useful, of course, the Holocaust archives in Jerusalem. Many people don't know how extensive the Holocaust was in the role of involving Sephardim in France, Netherlands, Romania, Italy, Germany, Greece, Macedonia. People perished because they were Sephardim. It's not just Ashkenazim. And Sephardic Jews lived across Europe. There are searchable databases. There are pages of testimony. I always encourage people that if they unfortunately had ancestors, relatives who were caught up in the Holocaust, that if they have the details, they should fill out a page of testimony. It's available at the Yad Vashem website, and add the names to the list so their names are there and family information is there. Okay, there we go. Okay, Sephardic Gen, yeah, there we are. It still has a Sephardic SIG. It was originally put together by Jeff Malka, and I was involved in that, but it really never went anywhere. The data that was on there has not been expanded. All of the updated information is at jeffsephardicgen.com site. There's a Sephardic SIG discussion group. It's not very active. HUC, Hebrew Union College, the Sephardic Studies section is amazing. Now, every single website that I mention has a section for links. So go to them just for the sake of seeing what else they are linked to. As we all know, databases change, the addresses change, links are updated, they forget to update the old links, but always check the link section of every website. You'll find much more information than we can cover here. This particular one has articles, it has journals, it has audio resources, there's music, there are PDF files, there are maps, everything is searchable, Sephardic history, genealogy, digital archives, information on Ladino. Get a cup of coffee and sit down and start going through all of these. SephardicStudies.org covers genealogy, history, Ladino language. It covers the Ottoman Empire, Turkey, Israel, Middle East, many, many databases, many digital archives, a collection of academic papers and articles, as well as publications and books and more links again. The American Sephardi Federation, based in New York at the on 15th Street. What is it? Oh, the Center for Jewish History, of course. Their library is part of the main library at the Center for Jewish History. And the librarian there is Arden. Yes, he's a member of Tracing the Tribe. He's great. Books, the Sephardic Report was a magazine/newsletter that comes out. There are online articles, Sephardic history resources. They have records from some unusual places like Rangoon, Burma, and Calcutta, India. There are Sephardic family histories, and of course the library that's there. And again, many more links to Sephardic resources. The Society for Crypto-Judaic Studies is more than 25 years old. CryptoJews.com is the website, and they're also on Facebook. They have an annual conference. The next one will be in Dallas in the summer of 2021. They put out a Halapi Journal, which is a full-color, beautiful magazine edited by Corinne Brown. There are many articles, personal stories, books, plays, films, reviews, more global links, and a Facebook page. Saudades is focused on Portuguese Sephardic history. Lots of resources, personal memories. They do have a forum, and again, many more links. More and more archives are providing for online accessibility and also digitization projects to preserve the original documents. That includes archives, universities, and libraries around the world. Spain particularly, the Crown Archives of Aragon in Barcelona, everything, they're digitizing everything. There are some things available on Paris, of course, and more things are being added to that. In the UK, there's the British Library, there are other universities. Here in the United States, Notre Dame University, Jewish Theological Seminary, Hebrew Union College, and others have Inquisition-era documents, as well as Jewish marriage certificates, which are called ketubot in Hebrew. In Spain, there are numerous branches. The one that I know best is the Archival de Real Corona de Aragon. It's in Barcelona. I've visited there numerous times with Maria Jose. Beautiful building, and everything is sit and punch buttons, and you get lots of stuff. It's really great. So it's a wonderful, wonderful collection of archives. In the New World, the Inquisition records are in Mexico City, and that covers Panama and the Philippines. The ones in Lima cover most of South America. The ones in Cartagena were considered lost, but they're in private hands. A good resource for those records are Jeannie Milgram, and that covers the northern coast of South America and the Caribbean. There are lots of research going on all over Spain. Maria Jose is also doing work in Tarrega. She did the work in Cervera. And I've been to several times to Lleida and Lerida. The first time I went there, long time ago, I was very lucky because Maria Jose actually comes from around Lleida. and the priest that was in charge of the historical archives knows that his family was a Converso family. I remember walking in there in the old cathedral, which was there from the early 1300s, I guess. And the marble steps are completely worn out, kind of in the middle. It's dangerous going up. It's even more dangerous coming down. And I sat down, and they handed me, the archivist, the head archivist, handed me a plain manila folder. It had a document for our family dated 1358, and it had a document dated 1202 for the Lobby de Cavalleria family. This is from my friend Dan Labby, who actually is a pediatric ophthalmologist at Harvard. There are also some of Jeff Malka's documents in this archive as well. And so this is usually where I say, Ashkenazi, eat your heart out. I mean, to see a folder with the original documents dated 1358 and 1202 is really something. It was very, very emotional. Of course, we have Pares, which is a Portal de Archivos Españoles. There are many, many documents. It helps to know Spanish because these things are not translated, but numerous digitized documents. The handwriting is something else that I cannot advise you on, but the more you look at them, the more it becomes easier. This is our document from 1358. This is the original. Anybody that can translate this one deserves an award. Luckily, Maria Jose can. So this is part of it. These are the leaders of the Jewish community, the names in the top half. Many of them, of course, I don't think very few people will recognize them as Jewish names because they're not Jewish names of today, but very common in medieval times. The document actually was it was a legal document brought up concerning how much kosher wine could be brought into the city of Jeddah, at what times and in what amounts and from where. Amazing document, translated into modern English. It could have been written yesterday. And this document was signed the 18th day of the month of June in the year 1358. It was also signed by the officials of the city, and it's an amazing document, really amazing document. From 1398, we also have mentions of our family who lived. These people lived in Alcaraz, which is south of Jeddah. This is actually, they're looking for them to pay their taxes, but they were gone already. So Jacob and Astruc. And you can see they were, in Latin again, they were Jewish inhabitants, residents of the town of Alcaraz. Going back to Amsterdam, a wonderful archive are the records from Dotar, which is an Amsterdam Jewish charity, which provided dowries to Iberian Sephardic orphan girls and young women around the world so they could marry. Each year on Purim, they compiled, they had a list, and on Purim they had the drawing, and the winner got a dowry. The lists are preserved in the City Archives of Amsterdam from 1615 to 1886. Ton Thailand, the archivist, compiled a list of candidates who came to the New World, and it's a fantastic source of genealogy. It includes bride and groom's names, father's names, towns, and dates. This is one that was really interesting from Rachel Mendez, who received a dowry of 370 guilders. In Amsterdam, Rachel, who was the daughter of David Mendez, won the 5401 lottery, but did not find a husband until her father moved to Brazil. The chief rabbi of Recife, Isaac Aboab, confirms the marriage of Rachel to Abraham Abudiente with a dowry of 370 guilders. These are some of the names, just a quick extract. You can see that people were in Jamaica, in Poland, in Brazil, in Curacao, in Barbados, in Suriname. But I always like to show the one, if you see up, the second one from the top was in Poland. So there were Sephardic Jews all over the place. This is a Sephardic ketubah from 1648. Isaac Senior, who new name became Techera, and his bride Rachel de Matos. It was stolen from Etz Chaim in 42 and returned in 45. It now is in the Hamburg Museum of History. Bet Chaim in Oudekerk on the Amstel is the Portuguese Jewish cemetery in Amsterdam. It was mapped and described by David Enriquez de Castro in 1850. There are 31 of these charts describing every single burial there at the time. Another document I love was from October 2nd, 1364. This is also from Cervera. And Astruc de Pieta promises not to play dice and other games for 2 years, beginning on that day. I guess it was the Gamblers Anonymous of Cervera. So this is a great little thing here. This is another one from 1422. And Bonion was the widow of Samuel Asael from Saragossa. This is the inventory of her husband's properties. This is lists who the witnesses were: Isaac de Kersi, Samuel de Luna. Wonderful document as well. For Italian Jewish Archives, Nardo Bonomi does the Italian Jewish Archives, ItalianFamilyHistory.com. He covers the major towns in Italy proper and also in Sicily, which had some 50 Jewish communities in the 13th century. There we go. Folk literature of the Sephardic Jews is wonderful. The University of California, Davis. Many entries there that are wonderful. Jeannie Milgram's site is Sephardic Ancestry, archival information for Spain and Portugal. And you can go visit her site at sephardicancestry.com. There are Sephardic recordings, including my cousin Isaac Azos and his family at the University of University of Washington, rather. In the UK, resources include the extensive archives at the Bevis Marks Spanish and Portuguese Synagogue, the Jewish Chronicle, which has now been preserved from disappearing, continuously published since 1841 with social announcements, business information, and lots of genealogical records for births, engagements, marriages, and deaths. There are other numerous books compiling marriages from major synagogues, and of course the Jewish Genealogical Society of Great Britain is a wonderful resource. Blogs and Facebook. I started with Tracing the Tribe, the Jewish Genealogy blog. It is now inactive. I guess in California we call it's on hiatus, but the 3,000 posts are still available at tracingthetribe.com. We then went over to Tracing the Tribe, Jewish Genealogy on Facebook. Thanks to Thomas McCanty's pushing. We have almost 34,000 global members from everywhere. A wonderful resource. There's a great website for the Maduro family that covers Sephardic Jewish families connected to the Maduros from all around the world. There are many others, and Google is your friend, as we say. As far as the other Facebook groups, Tracing the Tribe, Sephardic Diaspora, Tan is wonderful. I really love the guy. There are Facebook groups for the American Sephardi Federation, Society for Crypto-Judaic Studies, Sephardic Jews and Crypto-Jews in History, Apellidos Sepharditas, Genealogia, Genetica, Sephardim, Sepharad, Sephardic Jews in Poland, Western Sephardic Tradition, Genealogical Society of Hispanic America, the Genealogical Society of New Mexico, and many others. Now, there are journals, the International Sephardic Journal, the Journal of Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian Crypto-Jews. Nashim is the Women's Issues and Gender Studies. They often have Sephardic information in there. Sephardic Horizons is a free journal that's online every month. It has articles and book reviews. There are books. There are books. Every day there's new books. Books on names, onomastics, history, culture, personal journeys. The one that I was talking about, Per Bonin, on the left is Sangre Judía, but only the 4th edition. It's the 4th edition aumentada. The other editions only list the names with no other information as to year of document or town of document. Sephardic Genealogy is now in the second edition by Dr. Jeffrey Malka. There's the Feigenbaum Diccionario de Sobrenomes. Stan Hortis was the former state historian of New Mexico and wrote To the End of the Earth with the information on the Converso communities, of course, here in New Mexico. Aaron Dembski of Bar-Ilan wrote Those Are Their Names on Sephardic Jewish names. Doreen Carvajal, from a journalist in the International New York Times and other publications, wrote her personal story, The Forgetting River. Professor Seth Kunin, Juggling Identities, and Per Bonin's second book is Sangre Judía 2, that was written on where the Jews went after they left Spain and the communities that they created. So we have societies and groups, archives, libraries, genealogy, cultural, academic, more and more every day. Again, the American Sephardi Federation. Alan Farhi's Flor de Orient is a wonderful collection of genealogies. Society for Crypto-Judaic Studies. All across Spain, you have Tarbut Sepharad branches in many towns. There are some fascinating community projects. One of them that I love that's at My Heritage is the Bnei Israel community by Nassim Moses. And he has more than 20,000 names in there, 20,000 photos, sections on food, artifacts, customs, music, and much more. Pantano, Sicily is an ancient town with diverse roots. They recently discovered Jewish history there, and they're involved in reconstruction, preservation, and much more. Now, as far as Sephardic DNA projects, Judy Lefkowitz-Simon and I set up the Iberian Ashkenaz DNA project back in 2007. There's the Avoteno Jewish Heritage Project, managed by Adam Brown, Le Fleur d'Orient, Alain Farhi, there's Sicily DNA, New Mexico DNA, New Mexico Genealogy Society, DNA Project. DNA projects are really helpful. Now, there are conferences. All the conferences in 2020 kind of have disappeared. Roots Tech was lucky. We got through that and then it hit. But there will be conferences in 2021, we're hoping. Albuquerque in 21 will do Resiliencia. This is will be the new organization, Centro Sepharad, New Mexico, with the Instituto Cervantes, a week-long festival of art, music, lectures, and films. IAGGS this year we're assuming will be kind of a virtual conference. The Society for Crypto-Judaic Studies will be in Dallas in the summer of 21, and there will be a B'nai Anosim conference in El Paso also in 21. Centro Sepharad, New Mexico is the new innovative Sephardic heritage program of the Jewish Federation of New Mexico. It's an outgrowth of our Spanish citizenship project. Activities and planning include webinars, music, education, history, DNA, conferences, outreach to emerging communities. This is the email, Centro Sepharad, New Mexico, nm@gmail.com. If you email, you can have your name added to the mailing list. They'll go live in a few days, Centro Sepharad, New Mexico. Whoops. Okay, now, of course, I am, and I didn't even introduce myself in the beginning, but I am the U.S. Genealogy Advisor for My Heritage. I love My Heritage. What can I tell you? It's great. And as far as our My Heritage DNA, we are the only company that offers 5 Jewish categories. The 5 Jewish DNA categories are Ashkenazi, Yemenite, Ethiopian, Sephardic North Africa, and Mizrahi, Iran, Iraq. The categories were determined after extensive testing via the MyHeritage Founders Population Project. People submitted generations of documented backgrounds, and then we were able to organize this into the 5 categories. The one thing I always tell people, because I get emails all the time, it doesn't say Sephardic, even though we know we're Sephardic. I always tell them, don't look for the word Sephardic. It's unlikely you'll find it. Look at your map. If your map shows Iberia, North Africa, Italy, Sicily, Greece, Turkey, the Balkans, the east coast of the Mediterranean. If it shows Mizrahi or West Asia, that covers Iran and Iraq. This is basically the post 1492 migration exile. Post 1492 exile migration route where people went. And of course, if it says New World and Caribbean, you're looking over there as well. But don't always look for the word Sephardic, because that's really not going to help. You have to look at your geographical map. Now, this is, I like doing this because we have West Asia in here. And if you go here, we know that the person who submitted this, they're actually from Iran. So we know that. They also have a North African component, and they're also Turkey. So it's the Middle East. This is a whole, doesn't say Sephardic, but this is Sephardic and Mizrahi, which is really helpful. Now we have another person. There are lots of them, but we have the Mizrahi side, the West Asia, the South Asia side, the West Asia side, as well as European. So we're looking at Ashkenazi, Mizrahi, Sephardic background. This was rather obvious, North Africa, 100%. And this actually shows, of course, Sephardic Jewish North African, because those are the populations that were tested at MyHeritage. For Persian Jewish sites, we're limited. There really is not a lot. The records are not out of Iran. They're in Tehran. We have Beheshtia, which is the Jewish cemetery photos of the Tehran graves. On the left is my late husband's grandfather, Yaakov ben Israel Dardashti, and on the right is one of the cousins, Solomon Shlomo ben Rachamim. As you can see, they're in Hebrew and they're in Farsi, and they're easy to see because on Solomon's you can see it says Dardashti. Shlomo. It's Shlomo Dardashti, and here we also have the Dardashti, but it's a little harder to see. But that's an amazing resource if you have Persian backgrounds. I always talk about the crypto Jews because I live in New Mexico, and for us here it's extremely important. We know that many will not speak to researchers. Many know much more than they share publicly, and it's always the future versus keeping secret. We like to remind people that the word Marano is considered pejorative and insulting. I would definitely not use it here in the American Southwest, although we do know there are some communities that use it, but here it's considered really insulting and pejorative. The name, of course, B'nai Anasim, Converso, is excellent. There are tons of more resources. Each site that I've mentioned, check the links for more sources. Set your Google alerts for Sephardic topics. Attend the Sephardic programs at general conferences and at specialized Sephardic conferences. Join the discussion list, join the Facebook groups, and subscribe to various Jewish genealogy blogs for more events, programs, books, and more. I thank everybody who's been involved with this because they have been so helpful in so many ways for furthering the information and the resources that we have. And now we have time for questions. Daniel. Did we lose Daniel?
Hey, hello, Shelley. Do you hear me now?
Hi, Daniel.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. Excellent. Thank you very much, everybody. Yes. We have a lot of questions coming in through the question panel, and you're more than welcome to keep writing them, and I will read them.
Yes.
A few you already answered because Bill was asking for your personal email, which is right now on screen. So, Bill, this is your
Yeah.
opportunity.
One thing, let's not, for my personal email, I forgot to change this. I'm having a lot of difficulty with the Tracing the Tribe domain. So actually, if you just write to tracingthetribe@gmail, that's much better. Don't use this one because I have a lot of trouble with the domain. But you can always write to me at MyHeritage.
Okay, so use the MyHeritage, and then you can
Yes, please.
direct them to the Gmail one. I was about to write it on the
Absolutely.
chat.
Yes.
Okay, now Randy and others are asking about a handout or a list of links.
Yes. We do have the 4-page handout. How do you suggest we do that, Daniel? I didn't even think about that, but yes,
Okay.
because I have all the links. I have all of these things.
So other people
it-
are asking for your PowerPoint, and what I said is that we are actually recording this lecture. So if you
Yes.
send me the handout, I'm going to make sure that tomorrow when you receive the email about being in the session, you will receive a link to the recording video and to the handout as well with all the links.
Excellent. Excellent.
Okay. Now,
Great.
let's see. Donna is asking about the HUC data, if it's in English.
Most of the archives, let's put it this way, most archives, if they have the original documents, it will be in the original language. I'm sure there are Hebrew documents because they have collections of ketubot, of the Jewish marriage certificates. Generally, on most of these sites, they have translations available. It will be in another box. It will be next to it. But generally, if they are US based, UK based, somewhere on there will be the translation of the documents. But archives, of course, deal with original documents. So whatever language the document was in originally, it will have that digital image of the original document in the original language. And then there should be a translation of the pertinent, maybe not the entire document, but at least for ketubot, it will say who the bride and the groom was, when it was, the date, the witnesses, things like that. So
okay.
yes.
Okay, good. Now you have the answer. Nadine is okay. Nadine is just wanting the links, and you will get it, Nadine. Elias is asking for a little bit more of explanation between the North African ethnicity and the Sephardic from North Africa ethnicity in MyHeritage. And okay, you want to talk about the MyHeritage DNA? You open that box? Because what he's saying is that in his DNA test on MyHeritage, he doesn't show any Sephardic. It shows North African. But in family tree DNA says Sephardic.
Yes. Yes.
And Iberian and Italy.
Exactly. Every DNA company uses different terminology. Number one. Family tree DNA uses the word Sephardic. They also have the geographical distribution. Daniel, for some reason this, hold on one second. Let me get it back.
What do you want? You want to go back?
No, I'm going back to my DNA. Okay, here we are.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we know when the founders' population was done, it did extensive testing with immigrants from specific countries. They submitted 3 to 4 generations of documents. They knew where they came from. And so it's across North Africa. So we'll know who was originally Moroccan, who was Tunisian, Algeria, etc. But what we ought to have to understand is that while there were mixtures in North Africa with Berbers and indigenous Jewish communities, the descendants of those people that left Spain in 1492 also went to North Africa. So in some cases, it might be indigenous. In a lot of other cases, these are the descendants of those conversos that went there. The reason, this is why I always tell people, don't get hung up on the word Sephardic, because it may not come through as Sephardic, because we have on MyHeritage, we have 5 categories, right? So we have Ashkenazi, we have Yemenite Jewish, we have Ethiopian Jewish, we have West Asia, Iran, Iraq, Mizrahi, Jews of the East, and we have Sephardic North Africa. I always look at the map. I mean, this one is an obvious one, right? I mean, the map that we're showing right now, there's no question. And we know, of course, we know who the person was, who this is from, and they're from North Africa, and they're from several countries in North Africa who later met and married. But all their families, as far as they know, they are from North Africa. But always look at the geographical distribution. That's the most important one. I have people all the time that are saying, but we know we're Sephardic, but it doesn't say Sephardic. It may not say Sephardic. So that's why you have to look at the map. The first one, we have this one, like West Asia, because we know the family, in this case, we know the families from Iran, but later on they married people from North Africa, and then they married someone from Turkey. So it's a mixture there. But while it may not say, like in West Asia, it doesn't say Sephardic, but we know there were Sephardim that went to Iraq and Iran for sure. North Africa, we know who went there. And the Middle East, this is definitely a Jewish family that comes from all 3 areas. So it doesn't say Sephardic, but looking at the map, we know what it means. We know what it means. So don't get hung up on not seeing the word Sephardic. Look at the geographical maps. And that goes for family tree DNA. It also goes for MyHeritage DNA, because it may not say Sephardic. May not say Sephardic.
Okay, so Holly is asking that her mother came from Veria, Greece during the Ottoman Empire, and they did not have surnames. Father's first name were used as a surname, patronymics. So none of the names are on any list, such as Daniel, Rafael, Hanania. So difficult to trace. Right. Any suggestion for Holly?
Okay. For Holly, the Ottoman Empire, the consensus of most researchers is that the records are all there in Turkey, in Istanbul, or in various places. They are preserved, they are kept. Many of the records for the Ottoman Empire, especially for the Turkish communities, were written, if they're not written in standard Hebrew, they're written in Soletreo, which looks kind of like Rashi Hebrew handwriting, but it's not. There are very few people that can read Soletreo. There's actually courses being given at the Sephardic Studies program at the University of Washington in Seattle. The records are there. You can try reaching the chief rabbi's office in Istanbul. You can Google that. They're very slow. I'm still not sure whether they speak English, or if they may speak English and they'll write to you in Turkish. The Ottoman Empire is different because there were so many different places with so many different influences. Some of the people in Istanbul, the ones that came back in 1492 and 1500s, the ones that that were invited to come to Constantinople, did keep family names. In other places, they didn't. We have the same situation, by the way, if anyone is on the talk from India, is that when the Baghdadi Jews there are three different groups in India: the Cochin Jews, the Beni Israel, and the Baghdadis. The Baghdadis were the Persian and Iraqi Jews that went there. The story there in Bombay and in Calcutta was that if you had a foreign name, so in other words, our Dardashti relatives that went to Bombay, if you wanted to go to school, the Jewish school in Bombay said your family name is foreign. Your new family name is now your father's Hebrew name. So instead of our family keeping the Dardashti name, it became Gabai, it became Menashri. We had the 5 or 6 different names because there were 6 brothers. They each had different Hebrew names. So that is a problem. Yes, and so the Ottoman Empire is another one like that, where the names were dropped because they were considered quote unquote foreign names. It just requires more digging. It requires a lot of digging. I wish it was easier. I hope tomorrow that the entire, all these records will be online. I don't have great hope tomorrow, but we can hope in the future. I will also say that, and this includes the records in Portugal and in other places. Jeannie Milgram is working on it's called the Converso Project, and MyHeritage is involved with that as well. They're going into the archives, and they are determining record groups that need to be digitized because the records are literally crumbling and falling apart. So MyHeritage is also involved in that, in trying to get these crumbling records that are just disintegrating to digitize those and translate them and make them available online. So Jeannie Milgram is a good resource for that, for the Converso project. You can reach her at her website, sephardicancestry.com. But that's something that I'm really proud about, that MyHeritage is working with Jeannie and a number of other people, of course, on making these records available in the archives where the records are disintegrating and crumbling.
Okay, so Tracy is asking about research Tangier during 16th and 17th century.
Interesting question. Okay, Tangiers is not my field of expertise, and I'm trying to think who might be. There's probably Daniel. I wouldn't be surprised if the records were in the Central Archives of the Jewish people in Jerusalem. There might be records there.
Definitely, yeah, it's worth while the try, and not only for Tangier, but for any other Jewish community, Sephardic community or Middle East community.
Absolutely.
I will definitely try that.
Yeah, and I would also, the caveat there is that if they're in the Central Archives of the Jewish people, these are all original documents, either the original documents or photocopies in the original language. And as we all know, archival staff everywhere in the world is really, really overworked. You probably need someone who's fluent in Arabic to go there and help you, or to find a researcher there. IGRA might be able to help in that.
Well, IGRA may help with the location and the archive, but not with the records. Now, I'm going to take advantage of my position here. If anyone has roots in Sefro, I think you say like that, Sefro. I'm actually in charge of transcribing some birth records from there, so feel free to contact me directly, Daniel at myheritage.com. And Carolyn is saying, I guess in name of JGS Greater Boston and everybody else here, Shelley, thanking you and MyHeritage for this exceptional program. So I know that people are really enjoying it. I'm going to read one more question because otherwise we're not going to finish here. Where I can
until
get...
well.
Yeah.
until my dinner. By you, it'll be breakfast. Right.
I already have dinner, so I'm gone. Where can I get more information about Polish Ashkenazi from Turkey? Wondering if I'm a descendant from them. Okay, so Turkey
Okay.
is your area, but Polish, I don't know, Ashkenazi, Polish in Turkey?
Okay. I have a book somewhere in my house. It is still packed in a box. When we came back from Israel in 2010, I have not opened these boxes of books. I would contact, for that, I would contact the chief rabbi in Constantinople, in Istanbul. You can Google it. They have in fact, I think the person that was running, they have a special project there at the museum. They have a museum project, and it's the information on that Polish community. There were names. The book that I have had a whole section on the Polish community, that 14th century Polish community that migrated to Turkey then. I'm pretty sure that the chief rabbi's office should have it.
Okay,
Because
so
literally until the beginning of this century and people started migrating, there were two separate communities. They had separate cemeteries, separate schools, separate synagogues. Everything was separate, and then everybody started marrying everybody else. So, but the records, I know the records are there because I have this book. I just can't find it. Otherwise, I would be able to tell you what it was and how to get it. Sorry.
okay.
I'm so sorry.
So just gonna read a suggestion here from Joel saying there is a great article on Ashkenazim in the Ottoman Empire on Brill online encyclopedia. So you can also check over there. And Benis is asking about the webinar, how he can hear it again. So I'm gonna say it again. We are recording this webinar and we're going to put it online, and we're going to send you the link to the webinar and to the handout in 24 hours exactly. You're going to receive an email with further details. Shelley,
excellent.
it's
Yes.
here in Israel, it's 10 p.m. In Boston,
and you're still up.
In Boston
And you're
should
still
be
functioning.
what? 4 o'clock?
Three. No, just one. 3 o'clock. Just 3 o'clock.
Okay.
Oh, are we going to tell them about June 11th?
Yes, in June 11th, we are going to have another webinar, and I'm going to send them also the information over that email.
Yes, and the one
in the Legacy Family Tree webinars, yes. When are you lecturing there?
They are on May 26th. They are presenting again my Jewish genealogy for non-Jews. Okay,
so there you have it. Family Tree webinars have Shelley's recording and other webinars for you. In the meantime, Boston or wherever you are, thank you very much. I hope, I'm sure you enjoyed. I did, and Shelley did, so why you don't? And it will be until the next time.
Okay. I am so happy that everybody joined us today. And Daniel, thank you so much for moderating. And we will send that information tomorrow. And if you can always contact me at Shelley@myheritage.com or tracingthetribe@gmail.com. Thank you so much, everybody.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Take care. Bye.